Joining me for all the chat today is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Thanks once again for joining us.
Morning.
Just in terms of particular this visa crackdown on particular nationalities, Nigerians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans and others who've been blamed for basically a biggest hit on asylum costs. The people who basically come here on a work visa, come here on a student visa, and then miraculously after 3 years or whatever on those visas go, oh, it turns out I need to claim asylum, I can't go home. And suddenly they then, a lot of them are on the public purse. Now they had money, they had a job, or they were studying. Suddenly they're destitute, and now we're having to look after them. I mean, I'm concerned that these people are playing the system. I don't think a single one of these people should be allowed. I mean, not a single one. End of. Bye-bye. Not my problem. But I think people are more concerned by these young men of work, of fighting age coming over on the boats. We don't even know who they are, coming through that route. But how, if Labour did do a proper serious crackdown on this, would that be enough to show that they were serious about this issue?
Potentially. I mean, it would at least demonstrate some movement, would be something that they could talk about. We've done more on this than the Tories in 6 months than they have in 14 years, but I just don't think it's ever going to get to that point. I mean, yes, this is a large part of the problem of kind of asylum/legal migration. It's just the less eye-catching aspect of it.
We're not actually seeing pictures of them on the boats.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's something that, if you wanted to take on this issue, of course, you would need to look at and you would need to take very seriously. I think the problem is that even if they are serious about this, even if that means they're willing to take on the legal challenges which will be forthcoming, in some of the reporting it's already pointing out that because you're singling out particular countries, it would be presented as discriminatory.
Absolutely.
And we all know...
I mean, but discriminatory for a reason.
We all know how cases like this end up when they go through the courts. They always end up getting knocked back to the government. Is Keir Starmer, the human rights barrister, willing to actually take on our human rights framework in order to make this happen? It's unclear.
And they're all his mates. I mean, you could just have a chat with them over the latest dinner party, couldn't he? Instead of waiting to go to court.
He knows this area very well, allegedly, so you would think that he would be able to anticipate this. But again, even if you clear all those hurdles, I don't think people are going to give them any credit for it. I think people are switched on to what Labour is doing that's bad and completely switched off to the things that they are doing that might actually be a bit more.
Is it also the same with the Tories, whether it's what the Tories were doing in the final year of their government or what Kemi Badenoch is talking about in policies now as the new Tory leader, that actually it doesn't matter what you do just before an election or what you do in the wake of a bad election result or what you do because you're trying to win power. No one trusts either of these parties anymore. I mean, no one. Even the people who are still voting Tory or people who are voting Labour, they don't actually trust those party leaders to do anything about certain of these issues, because we know they don't actually care about these issues, because not only did they not talk about them for years, when other people did talk about them, they shouted racist, bigot, xenophobe at them. They just criticise those policies that people do suggest, saying you need to do something about it. So why would anyone trust them? They suddenly go, oh, it turns out, no, I do want to do something about it. Same with the trans thing. Yeah. I mean, again, although this is, I think, much more serious than that. If someone was willing to pretend that they believe that women have penises, how could you ever trust them on anything ever again? I mean, and that's your fundamental issue. No one believes a single sodding word that Keir Starmer says about anything.
Absolutely, and it's that collapse in trust which has led us to this point where the two-party duopoly looks like it's completely crumbling, because for slightly different reasons people just do not trust either of these parties. The Tories said one thing and did another for 14 years, particularly on immigration, but on many issues as well. Keir Starmer's Labour Party says one thing and then says the complete opposite and does nothing. I mean, it's a kind of, just this sort of merry-go-round of different policy positions, and even so he just seems to be sort of not landing any kind of political blows whatsoever. So it's one of those things where even the Labour government would have to deliver to such a kind of clear-cut, noticeable in your everyday life degree on issues like cost of living and immigration for people to even start to warm to them, and even then that's a very long way back.
There would be a financial hit on the country short term, in terms of there would be a shortage of labour. There would be, but you need to have that shortage of labour to focus minds on the needs to get people off welfare, particularly young, perfectly able-bodied people who just can't be bothered to work. Oh, I have a bit of anxiety today, so I'm not going to go to work. It's a bit chilly today, it might rain, can't go to work. Sorry, we need to have those people, and yes, and I know you've got a lovely little degree that you spent 50 grand on, which says that you're a graduate, but You're not actually going to get a graduate level job because you've been sold a horrible lie from Blair onwards, and we need to get you into working. Sorry, it's simple as that. But you're not going to get those wages up for them to do it. You're not, unless you haven't got that free, basic supply of unskilled, low-wage labour from abroad. But also, while you've also got the option of being on welfare benefits. Now that ties in, of course, with Labour talking about also, well, we are told from the editor of The Guardian, possibility of a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Now, even Wes Streeting, their health secretary, who was doing the media round today, has admitted that, there's no doubt at all the winter fuel allowance cut for everybody but those who were on the lowest income pension credit was basically, it's Labour's poll tax. It's massively hit them. In all the polling, it shows that is the one policy that's broken through. We'll all witter on, and people who watch and listen to stations like this will be really aware of politics. It's what we do all day. It's what we're all fascinated by in the news. The vast majority of people haven't got a clue what's going on in terms of vast majority of these stories. They haven't heard of any of these people. They don't know about the policies. Winter fuel allowance is the single cut-through policy. So let's talk about this, any sort of, whether they means test it, whether you turn it. At the end of the day, the Chancellor, H. Reeves, came up with this idea, a mad policy in my view, came up with this idea as a way of helping to balance the books. Didn't balance the books. She's got to talk about cutting some disability payments. And again, it should be cutting your access to disability payments, not the actual payments to people who need them. But all of this is about balancing the books. She hasn't balanced the books. She's going to have to go much further and faster. But none of these policies are going to be popular with the vast majority of people.
And it's that basic lack of political nous which has dogged this government from day one. The thing about something like winter fuel payments, this is something that basically Treasury mandarins have wanted to do for a very long time. They just don't understand it. They think it's obviously not great for the old balance sheet.
But the solution was really simple, wasn't it? You just put it on, so it can be taxed. If you're a higher earner, so my parents, who are well off pensioners, they're from that generation that did very well, nicely well, but so they'll get taxed on it. So fine.
But it's one of those things where, again, if you had any sense to you, as you would come up with a solution like that, or you'd suggest we can't do it in the way that you're prescribing. But again, Rachel Reeves come in, sort of Treasury orthodoxy is wonderful, let's embrace everything they say, and you end up with a disaster like this. Again, they just don't seem to understand. I think because largely I think they're playing to often sections of the media, or often what they see as a
Labour
kind of
Party conference.
Labour Party conference to an extent, but also just a kind of general public perception. Labour's problem is that we're not seen as sensible on finances, so we need to overcompensate to such a degree that actually looks quite mean-spirited.
We'll overcompensate by cutting money to some of the poorest elderly people in the country, and we think that'll play well.
If you want to prove yourself to be fiscally competent, just be fiscally competent. You don't have to engage in these kind of theatrics and these kind of blunt instrument policies in order to get that across the line. But also, if you think about, and again, it's one of those things when people talk about the austerity under the Tory Lib Dem coalition in 2010 to 2015, how unpopular that was. Well, apart from the fact that the Tories got re-elected with a majority in 2015, that's how unpopular it was. British people aren't stupid. I mean, again, look, people like to vote for. I want more spent on the 10 things I care about, and I don't want to be taxed anymore. Tax someone over there. Yeah, I mean, everyone's we all want a free pass, don't we? But people get that you need money to pay for things, no,
and if there isn't enough money, you're not going to get those things.
It does feel like we're probably in a slightly different era now because of the fact that those coalition and then Conservative governments did not deliver the economic gains, that we did not recover from 2008 properly. Then we were hit by
productivity,
by COVID, lockdowns, war. The combination of all those things, I think, makes the politics of belt tightening a lot more difficult in this current era.
I think you'll find, if you check more closely, that actually it's all the fault of Brexit.
No, exactly.
Did you not get that memo?
A bit more friction at the border has been the problem, rather than the war and pestilence and disease.
That's been the issue. Shutting down the entire economy for a year and a half, absolutely not the issue. Having to fill out some forms at the EU border, absolutely the issue. I have to say, though, I haven't been away for the weekend. I'm quite happy to queue. Sorry, but it's just like when you see you've got sort of 10 passport officers, completely no one at the gates. Oh yeah, EU through. Yeah, everyone arriving on this plane is British, and we're all queuing up. You just think, really? And we let them through our gates?
Yeah.
Just saying, it's just bloody mindedness. But I will take the queue. By the way, we always used to have to queue before. By the way,
it's a small price for freedom.
It is a small price, but it is. Do you have a British passport? Yes, and proud of it, I say. And everyone looks at me like, yeah, very well. Anyway, so the visa crackdown's not going to work. Rethinking winter fuel doesn't work for the Labour Party. What about Kemi Badenoch? What can she do? Is it over for her? And the Spectator's deputy editor, Freddie Gray, seemed to think it was already over. Tory MPs talking about ousting her. They were already talking about her lasting a second set of local elections. They knew these ones would be bad. They came from a high water mark in 2021. They were particularly bad. Reform's threat is not just to the Tories, though, it's to Labour as well. I think I'm in that difficult thing was that I think I rate Kemi Badenoch. I think she's been right about a lot of things. She's spoken out on a lot of issues, and she raised questions about net zero. She just didn't sort of play along on the trans madness and things like that. But completely quiet on lockdown. That is a big black mark against her. Like, where were you on lockdown? A lot of people say she's lazy. They say this idea that she thinks she's got a few years before to come up with policies, that she isn't taking the fight to reform. She's too wary of what she seems to be upsetting people in central office in terms of, actually getting people to be motivated in campaign. Is the problem Kemi Badenoch? Is it policies? Is it the fact that no one wants the Tory party back right now after 14 years in power, in which case it doesn't matter if, Jesus Christ himself was leading the Tory party, he wouldn't be voted for?
I mean, it is worth remembering just how historic that defeat was last time around. I mean, this was unprecedented in the history of the modern Conservative Party. It was humbling to end all humblings for them. I mean, it was really quite tremendous. So anyone who inherited that kind of poison chalice, it was always going to be difficult. At the same time, I don't think even they were caught slightly unawares by how much Reform could continue to capitalise on their gains at the election and essentially assert themselves in terms of vote share, in terms of the media narrative, as the opposition, even though they've only got a handful of MPs still. That is something that has completely caught the Conservatives unawares, and it has really confronted with them with the clear possibility that the next election they are displaced as the main party on the right of British politics. So this is something which it's not clear to me that any of certainly the candidates who were running last time around could have got any further. I think this is a brand that is really in the doldrums and needs to be brought back up again. But they're just not even getting any political oxygen at the moment. And yes, you can claim that's because they haven't been picking the right issues, they're not going on the attack in the right way, but also because momentum is a hell of a thing. Reform have it. Where in the same way that Boris Johnson managed to kind of keep Reform in its box, those things have completely flipped now in terms of appealing to those Brexity voters. That's just becomes a kind of irresistible force.
And Nigel Farage, that whole line, well, if you vote Reform, you'll get Labour. If you vote Reform, you'll get the Conservatives. So, don't vote Reform. Don't do your little protest vote. And when it turned around with Reform, not only winning a load of council seats, but coming second in a huge number as well, taking control of 10 councils. And this idea that actually, in this piece that Nigel Farage wrote at the weekend, basically saying, if you vote Conservative, you will actually get Labour. If you vote Labour, you will get Conservative. If you want vote Reform, you have to vote Reform. I mean, this is going to be a very, very, very powerful message, isn't it? It's interesting also, again, Nigel Farage, again, I'm totally allied with him on this in terms of the net zero madness, and we had Rich Tyson on the show many times as well. Brits overwhelmingly are on board on this now, 6 out of 10 in a new poll suggesting that basically, cutting the cost of living needs to come ahead of net zero drives and eco-friendliness and all that nonsense. Echoing, Tony Blair, now David Blunkett, by all accounts, Ed Miliband's just sacked Dame Mary Archer because she was sort of agreed with Tony Blair. Now, that lot, they aren't going far enough. They're going, oh, well, obviously climate change is a big issue. Obviously, we need to deal with it, but this isn't how we deal with it. No, I don't even think it's something to worry about. I think it's something that we will adapt to and technology will deal with, and we will come up with some cleaner energy at some point. Great, but absolutely we don't sacrifice our cost of living, and certainly we don't sacrifice the ability of the non-industrialised world to actually their ability to industrialise and improve their lives and literally save their lives and prolong their lives by using fossil fuels. But it's interesting how quickly that tide has turned. Those polls for years saying, oh, it's in the top 3 issues, people really care about the environment. No, they don't want people littering in their street or leaving their bins out. That's not what they mean. But actually, when you tell people this is what it's going to cost you, and it's costing you billions, but we're going to cut the winter fuel for your auntie or your gran, people say, you know what, no thank you. And
it's been like this for a long time. I mean, you poll people, do you like the environment, do you want it to be looked after? Of course, most people are going to say yes. You say, OK, would you be willing for your family to have to pay XYZ cost in order to get there. Say, well, of course not.
Or
no,
limit the number of flights you can take.
And that's not selfish. The whole point of politics, really, the whole kind of basis of the contract between politicians and the public is that we will make sure that your lives get better, that your kids will be able to live a better life than you have, etc., etc. Environmentalism flipped all that on its head. It was like, sorry, the deal's off because there's this abstract issue that we need to deal with, and actually we're going to impoverish ourselves and it won't make the blindest bit of difference.
But not only your kids not going to have a better life than you're not going to have a better life than your grandparents. You're going to go back to pre-industrial levels of life. Yeah. I mean, that's what people don't understand.
And this is one thing that Blair, I don't want to say to his credit because it's a bit late in the day, but pointed to. It's also saying explicitly you've got to fly less, you've got to enjoy yourself less. This is really important. I mean, the idea that this kind of hair shirt sort of approach to politics was ever going to last, and I think it was one thing where in slightly better times it was a luxury that Western countries could kind of afford.
People can play along
to an extent. That's not true anymore.
No, absolutely not.
And voters are starting to notice how the cost of these things in a way that they haven't done previously.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like, oh, well, you're spending money on sending billions over there, but you're putting money on my bills. Absolutely bad. And the numbers people are putting to us, it's a couple of £100 a year. Like, no, it's not. This is going to cost us trillions. It's absolute madness, the whole thing. One thing I haven't got to, and I want to, and again, we were hoping to have actually spoken to Tim Montgomery on the show, who was involved in this. This is Radio 4. Any questions? Sort of a big BBC show, the radio equivalent of the Question Time. And it was an extraordinary comment that Lucy Powell, the leader of the House of Commons, made when Tim Montgomery, who's set up Conservative Home, defected to Reform Party some months ago. He said, I don't know if you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs. It was on last Wednesday night. And as he said it, he was interrupted by Lucy Powell, and she said, oh, we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Oh, yeah, OK, let's get that dog whistle out. Now, you could feel even, and I know the audience is on these programmes because I've done them a lot of time, you could feel the audience go, oh, she's been criticised. Many have said she has now apologised. Oh, don't want people to misinterpret. People are saying she should be sacked from her job for this. Again, I'm not sure everyone needs to be sacked and, ousted from public life saying this, but that was a betrayal of a Labour Party view on this, wasn't it? This idea that when anyone mentions, when we talked about immigration earlier, or the grooming gang scandal was not looked into because of an issue over race and immigration. That's why it wasn't looked into in protecting people and don't want to be called a bigot by saying maybe it's not a good idea we allow white working class girls to be abused en masse by largely Pakistani heritage men in Labour controlled towns and cities around the country, which is a fair summary of what happened for 20 years and is still happening now. But do you think that she kind of gave the game away into that she's still using this phrase dog whistle? Because to a certain extent, she's just echoing what Keir Starmer has to say in terms of the Southport tax and things like that, that actually they do think of these things as just dog whistle issues. No,
absolutely. The mask slip there. I don't think there's any other explanation for it, not least because all of the other evidence. I mean, we've got this horrendous dog whistle comment talking about the industrial scale rape of some of the most vulnerable poor and working class girls in society. To call that as a dog whistle, I think is utterly despicable. We of course had Keir Starmer saying that when Robert Jenrick was calling for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, he was jumping on a far right bandwagon. Again, you can qualify these things after the point and say, I was talking about this politician or that. Yeah. People hear the same smear job that they've heard so many times over the years. And then there was that leaked Home Office report, which, yes, it was the officials and whatnot, but they said that the grooming gangs is part of a hard right extreme narrative. So it's one of those things where the fact that they keep having to walk these comments back at least shows that they realise they're on the wrong side of the public.
But it is what they think.
And this is another thing, particularly for Labour, the places where this took place are Labour areas, councils which were run by Labour up until quite recently, MPs in those seats. And what happened internally, and in terms of the national conversation, where you had many Labour officials and figures suggesting that this was a far-right bandwagon, that this was a dog whistle, and as a consequence of that, they essentially, run interference for all the more horrendous failures that happened by a lot of their own people on the ground. They can't continue to talk like that.
But also, mentioning a documentary about one of the most serious sort of mass crimes in this country's history, Labour banged on about Adolescence, a fictional drama on Netflix.
Which they kept calling a documentary.
Keir Starmer a couple of times called it a documentary. Talking in Parliament about it, talking about how wanting to show it to MPs, showing it in every school. I mean, by the way, I had a 15+. I'm not sure you can show it to many kids in schools. By the way, I'd rather my kids were being taught something than watching a fictional drama. Just extraordinary. Bang on about that. Not remotely, by the way, in any way sort of, a representative of knife crime at all. And a big fuss being made by the BBC about how Kemi Badenoch hadn't seen the Netflix documentary. I mean, so again, I've done it, Netflix drama. But it's a dog whistle to talk about the grooming scandal. Just extraordinary, it really is.